Hello and welcome to the program. I'm your host, Neal Howard, here on Health Professional Radio. Thank you so much for joining us. Our guest is Mr. Brian Bajan. He's an expert in relationships, an expert in how to communicate better with folks from all walks of life in, well, what we're going to talk about today, and I guess a fearless way, especially as it relates to us guys. Welcome to the program, Brian, and thanks for coming. Talk about Fearless.
Glad to be here, by the way. Fearless is, it's an organization I started about 10 years ago. Actually, probably about 8 years ago. I started it with a business partner about 10 years ago, and then I branched off on my own. And what it had to do with was in response to all these men going out and trying to, getting into this dating community, seduction community stuff, and really trying to figure out how to meet women, but were not working on themselves as men. And Fearless became this company where we really focused on confidence. We really focused on building masculinity. We really focused on building better relationships rather than just techniques and tricks and so forth.
This is not like a clothing thing or something like that. This is actually building up characteristics in men to better themselves in order to be a better catch.
Yes. Yeah, because you have to be what you want to draw. If you want somebody to fall in love with you, you need to give love. If you want somebody to be really feminine with you, if you're masculine, then you need to give the gift of masculinity. And for a lot of men, they don't even know what that is today.
Well, just the name Fearless is intriguing. I mean, we're men, and aren't we supposed to be fearless, from the jump? Or is there something that we're missing that we need to get?
That's a really good question. And no, we're not. We're constantly growing our ability to handle fear like a muscle. And so Fearless is kind of, it's an interesting name, but Richard Branson, if you know who he is, he's a self-made billionaire, owns Virgin Atlantic Airlines. He has a certain level of fear that's beyond the average man's, fearlessness, let's say. And he can handle a certain amount because his whole life he was taught to step into the unknown, take risk, go for adventure. And he really embodied that part of himself, like lifting weights every day from his childhood. He has a phenomenal book out there called Losing My Virginity, which really illustrates this. It's a powerful read. And for the average man, we don't do that anymore. We reach a certain stage of growth, and then we just stop, and we get complacent. And we start being told over and over again, don't take risk, don't rock the boat. Yet masculinity grows from challenge. Masculinity grows from having an adventure. But you know what? You got a good job. Don't rock the boat and go start a business. You're really young. Work for a few years. Then later, you got a wife. You got kids. You got a mortgage. You're going to lose it all. And that whole time, men they lose a little bit more of their soul because they're not out living a sense of purpose.
And doesn't that generate a certain amount of stress? And we all know that stress-related illness comes in many forms.
Yes, it does. And there's a really good study out there. It's a TED Talk by Kelly McGonigal. And it's called How to Make Stress Your Friend. And that TED Talk, if you watch, it's about 17 minutes long. And it really illustrates that it's not the stress that's the problem, because stress can either grow you or kill you. If I'm lifting weights as a bodybuilder and I'm lifting too much weight, I hurt myself. I'm lifting too little weight, I'm going to not grow. But if you're lifting that right amount of weight, you're going to grow from it, especially if you contrast it with rest. And in this TED Talk, she talks about a study where they took I can't remember, I think it was about 30,000 people. And they followed them over 8 years. And they asked them if they had a lot of stress, middle stress, or low stress in their lives. And then they asked them if they thought stress was good for them or bad for them. And at the end of the 8 years, they noticed that two groups stood out. The group that said they had a lot of stress, but stress was bad for them, had the most illnesses, just like you talked about, the most problems, the most failures, and the most deaths even. And at the end of the 8 years, the group that had a lot of stress but thought stress was good for them had the most successes, best health, greatest gains. And so they really began to realize that the belief that stress is bad for you is the bigger problem, bigger than stress even. And they had so Richard Branson, if you look at him, I refer to him because I loved his book. He really has a whole different relationship to stress. His parents taught him at a young age to constantly step into tension, and which is one of the things we talk about, and to make it your friend and to take risk and go for it. But the key is he has fun doing it. Most of us don't. We've decided it's bad for us because society told us that. And then we're out there doing it anyways because we need to build a business or whatever. And we're constantly worried about what's going to go wrong. And our subconscious is so powerful we create problems.
It's interesting that early in our discussion, you talked about Branson using his fearlessness, exercising it like a fearlessness muscle. Isn't that something that you can use? Say, you're in a relationship and it's toxic because you haven't gotten yourself together. So you've gotten in this relationship, but you've started to learn some things. Maybe you've gone to Fearless Live. When does masculinity play a part in getting out of a relationship so that you can start anew to be that confident person that you're supposed to be?
Well, masculinity is the ability to take, part of it is your ability to take risk and a step in attention. So if you realize it's not working for you, having the courage to say no, having the courage to set boundaries is a huge piece of that. And we have so many nice guys today because they haven't developed their masculinity. And I always say that in a relationship, what's most needed is not for you to be nice all the time, but for you to be real, to be honest, which sometimes means being nice, but sometimes means saying no, and sometimes means setting a boundary, and sometimes means breaking up. And that skill is underdeveloped in a lot of men today, not all men. And it can be developed because I'll tell you this much. Your relationship, when you get it, when you stop being nice all the time and you start being real, your relationships improve drastically. In
your experience, how often do you come across men who not only being full of fear are also full of some of the other stress-related illnesses that we briefly touched on? And then once they get in touch with their fearlessness, some of those other problems just simply, go away without them even noticing it for a while. And they just look up and say, hey, there are some other benefits as well.
Oh, very much so. Guys come to us all the time for dating confidence, but what they end up getting is they all kinds of other stuff. They end up learning to start businesses. They end up learning to rebuild relationships with their family. They end up learning to have lives and have fun, because that's a real big piece about it. A lot of these guys come to us and they're not even enjoying their own lives, and they think if they get a woman, it's going to change that. And so what we have to teach them to do is enjoy your life without a woman, and then watch the women will show up.
Now, in wrapping up, let's talk about Fearless Live and how this event brings awareness to men about how to cultivate their fearless side.
Yes, that's for 2 days straight. We spend 2 days straight really illustrating this, and one of the pieces that men can't see is all the subtle, tiny little ways they're telling the world how to treat them. It's subcommunication. It's in the little tiny micro expressions, body movement, things that you wouldn't even hardly see with the naked eye. And it tells women to like you or not like you. It tells other people to treat you with more respect or less respect. And in this event, we show you exactly how your subconscious mind and your belief in yourself is causing and changing these micro-expressions. We actually show you the micro-expressions right in front of you so you can start seeing them. There's tons of them, so you can't see them all. But the point is you start seeing the reality of how much you are telling the world how to treat you. And that's what the event's really about, stepping in front of a woman and noticing how you're telling her to reject you right away. And then you're wondering why women don't like you. As soon as you change that, suddenly women start treating you a little differently.
And not only women, but associates and colleagues as well.
Yes, yeah. We say women because that tends to really connect with men the most in the beginning, but then later they start to get past that and they want to move it into all areas of their life.
Now, where can we go and get some more information online about your organization and your events?
thefearlessman.com. And there's an events section in there. All the events are listed, including the Fearless Man Live here in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. It's one of my favorite workshops to teach because it's a bunch of new, excited, big-eyed people that are really curious. And by the end of the weekend, it's kind of like I feel like we're helping to open a whole matrix-type energy to them, show them a whole different world of possibilities.
Well, I appreciate you coming in and giving us this information and talking about your event. Brian Bajan, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And I'm hoping you'll come back and speak with us in the future.
It was a pleasure being here, and I'd be glad to come back anytime.
Great. You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neal Howard. Transcripts and audio of the programs are available at healthprofessionalradio.com.au and also at hpr.fm. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, listen in, and download at SoundCloud. And be sure and visit our affiliates page at hpr.fm.